The next conic section we're going to look at is an ellipse. And for our equation of an ellipse, again, we have two different options. We either have an ellipse that looks like this, where our major axis is horizontal, or an ellipse that looks like this. Major axis is vertical. And those are the two different equations that we have. The thing that makes this an ellipse is the plus sign in the middle, right here. So if you look down at the hyperbola, which we'll talk about next, it's got a subtraction sign in the middle. It looks very similar, but it's got a subtraction sign. This plus sign is what makes it an ellipse. Okay, so then another important information or piece of information here is that our A in the equation, A is always the bigger number. So when you are trying to determine which is A and which is B here, which comes first, you always put the bigger number in the position of A. Okay, and then also when we have a major or minor axis, sometimes our questions are going to ask us for the length of those, and there is a separate equation we can use for the length, which is going to be 2a for the major axis, or the length of the minor axis is 2 times b. Okay, so we're going to use this information on our ellipse in some examples. Our first example asks us to use the equation and find the given or the listed information, and then to graph the ellipse. So the first thing I know by looking at this equation is I have my bigger number right here comes first. So that means my a squared is right here. And if my a squared is right here instead of right here, this is my smaller number, I know my ellipse is going to look like this. So that tells me which equation I'm using first. Now I also know that this right here is my h, and this right here is my k. It's supposed to be a negative sign in between there. So since this right here is positive, my center is -1, 2. The center again is h, k. So the next thing I need to do is find my focus. And my point for the foci are h plus and minus. So that means my first focus is going to have a plus, my second focus is going to have a minus, c, comma, k. So to find my focus, I have my h and k, I need to find c. And my equation for c is the square root of a squared minus b squared. And so when I plug those in, this whole thing right here, a squared, equals 36. This 9 is equal to b squared. It's not b equals 9, it's b squared equals 9. So if I wanted to figure out what b was by itself, I'd have to take the square root of both sides, and my b by itself is 3. But over here, I just need a squared minus b squared, which I already know the whole a squared term is 36, minus my whole b squared term, which is 9. So now I have c equals the square root of 36 minus 9 is 27. So my answer for C is 5.2. So this means now I can find my foci. My first one is going to be H plus C, comma K, which equals H, which is -1, plus 5.2, comma K. So my focus is 4.2, comma K, which is 2. My second foci, I have H minus C, comma K. So I get -1 minus 5.2, comma K, and that is -6.2, comma 2. Okay, so now I have my 2 foci. The next thing it's asking for is the length of the major axis, and I know my equation for that is 2 times A. Now I know my A squared equals 36, so to find A by itself, I take the square root of both sides, and I get A equals 6. So I can plug that in. 2 times 6 is 12. So my major axis is 12. And then I also know that my major axis is going to be on the point y equals K. So that is y equals 2. And then for my minor axis, the length of that is 2b, which my b I already found up here was 3. 2 times 3 is 6. And my minor axis is on the line K equals H, which is K equals -1. So now I have all my information. I can draw a graph over to the side. My center is at point -1, 2. I have my focus. It is at 4.2, comma 2, so I'll go over 1, 2, 3, 4.2, so a little closer to the point 4. It's going to be right about there. Doesn't have to be exact, but it's close. And then -6.2, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So a little bit past the 6th mark. Those are my 2 foci. And then I know my major axis is 12 units long. So if I start at the center here and I count over, so if my whole thing is 12, that means half of it is going to be 6. So if I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's going to be right about there. And then 6 more to this side, right there. So I'm going all the way over to this line right here and this line right here. I'm going to do the same thing for my minor axis. I know it's 6 units long, so if I start at my center, I'm going to go up 3, 1, 2, 3. It's going to go up to here and then down 3. 1, 2, 3. So right here. So now I have all the information I need for my ellipse, I'm just drawing these points here at the ends of my major minor axes. I know those are my vertices, so I can connect all of those points to create my ellipse. Okay, let's look at the next example. This time, this is my equation. I have my bigger number over here this time, so this means this is my a squared, and my ellipse is going to be like this, up and down. So right away, I know my h and my k. My center is going to be 1, 1. And then I need to find my value of c to find my foci. So I'm going to find c by doing square root a squared minus b squared. So my a squared in this case is 25. My b squared is 16. So I have 25 minus 16. And that equals the square root of 9. So I get a c of 3. Now to find my foci, I'm going to take that c value. My foci for this one is h, k plus or minus v. So my first one is going to be h, k plus v, which is 1, 1 plus 3. So I get my first point as 1, 4. And then my second foci is h, k minus v. So I have 1, 1 minus 3, which gives me a point of 1, negative 2. Okay, and then I can find the length of my major axis by taking 2a, where my a squared equals 25. So if I want to find a, I need to take the square root of both sides. Get a equals 5. I'm going to do the same thing for b. B squared equals 16. So take the square root of both sides. I get b equals 4. So 2 times a is 2 times 5, which gives me 10. And my length of my minor axis, 2 times b, is 2 times 4, which is 8. So now I have all my information and I'm ready to graph. My first point, my center, is at 1, 1. So 1 to the right and 1 up. This is my center. Then my two foci, I have 1, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. It's my first foci, and then I'm going to go over 1 and down negative 2 for my second foci. And then I need to draw in my major axis and my minor axis. So I'm always starting at my center, and if my major axis is 10, that means half of that is going to be 5. So if I count from my center up 5, I'll know how long my major axis is. So if I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's going to be right here. I'm going to go down 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is my major axis. My minor axis is 8, so I'll count left 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, here, and right 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, over to here. So now I have all of my needed information. I can connect my points and draw my ellipse. In our next example, we're doing the opposite from what we were doing before. So now we're given the graph and we want to write the equation. So just like we were doing with the parabolas, right away we can tell which equation we're going to use based on how our ellipse looks. So our ellipse is up and down. That means we are using this equation right here. From our graph, we can get some of our important information that we need for an ellipse. So we know that the center of our ellipse is right here, and that point is -2, 0. So right there, I get my h and my k. My h is -2, and my k is 0. The only other things I need for my graph are a squared and b squared. But to find a, I could do it using the focus, and I could find c, and then figure out my a squared and b squared from doing all that. Or I could use my major axis. So remember, our equation for the major axis is 2 times a. Well, if I look at my major axis, I can count how long that is. If I start up here at my vertex and I count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I know that that major axis, 2 times a, is equal to 8. If I divide both sides by 2, I know that my a is equal to 4. And I can do the same thing with my minor axis. My minor axis is 2 times b. And if I count my minor axis here, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 across. So 2b is equal to 4. Divide both sides by 2 to get b by itself. I get b equals 2. So now I have all the information I need. A equals 4 and b equals 2 to plug into my equation. So I get x minus a -2 squared plus y minus 0 squared. And on the bottom of this one, I have b squared, which is 2 squared. And on the bottom of this side, I have a squared, which is 4 squared. And that all equals 1. So I can simplify this all a little bit. On the top here, if I have 2 negatives in the middle there, I know it's really a positive. X plus 2 squared. And then 2 squared gives me 4. And then I add on y minus 0 is just y, so all I have left on this side is y squared, and 4 squared gives me 16. So this is my final equation of the ellipse. Okay, my last example says write the equation of the ellipse that meets each set of conditions. So the first thing it tells me is that the foci of an ellipse are -5, 3, and 3, 3. It also tells me that my minor axis is 6 units long. I can start this problem by drawing a small graph and graphing my foci. So if I do that, I have -5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3, 1, 2, 3. So my first one is here, My second one is 3, 3. 1, 2, 3, up 3. Okay, these are my two foci. I know that my center is going to be right in between. So if I count the distance between my two foci, got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in between. So that means that my center is going to be right here. 4 over. We got 4 on each side. 8 is the total, so 4 on each side. That point right there, my center is -1, 3. So if I know my center is -1, 3, I have my H and my K. Also looking at this picture, if my foci, my major axis is horizontal, I know my ellipse is going to look like this. So my equation I'm going to use is x minus h squared over a squared plus y minus k squared over b squared equals 1. So what I have left to find next is my a and my b. I already have my foci, and I know that those points are h plus or minus c, comma k. And my c is the distance from the center to a focus. So if I want to figure out what C is, I can just look at the graph I drew, and I know from my center to my focus, that distance there is 4 units. So my C is equal to 4. Now what I want to do next is relate C to my A squared and B squared. So if I look up above, again, it told me my minor axis is 6 units long. So if I know my minor axis equals 6, well, the equation for that was 2 times b. So if 2b equals 6, I can figure out what my b is. My b is equal to 3, so that means b squared equals 9. And my equation for c is the square root of a squared minus b squared. Now I know my c and my b squared, so I can figure out my a squared. I know 4 equals the square root of a squared minus 9. To get rid of that square root, I can square both sides. 4 squared is 16, and I get a squared minus 9. Add 9 to both sides, I get 25 is equal to a squared. Take the square root, I get 5 is equal to a. Okay, so now I have all my points, all my information. I know my h is -1, my k is 3, my a squared is 25, and my b squared is 9. I can plug it in and get my final equation. X minus the -1 squared over 25 plus y minus 3 squared over b squared, which is 9, equals 1. And again, you can rewrite this first one as x plus 1, 2 negatives equal a positive, and this is my final equation for this ellipse.